Yes.
Okay. Uh, will anyone like to summarize what we discussed last week? I think you were there in the last session, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
So I think in the last session we mostly talk about the project initiation stage. What are the BA roles and responsibilities into that particular stage? Then we also discuss about difference between BA and PM roles and responsibility, and how BA should not you know goes into the or doing other like PM work in the project planning phase.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
So, what were your three takeaways from that session? So, what are the three things that you thought made sense to you, and you thought like this is something I should remember going forward.
So main takeaway. See, right now I work as both B and PM. So takeaway from that session. So if I go into the organization or in company where there is a separate PM and separate BA, then for me, I should know my boundaries and I should do that amount of work only. For example, I will be focusing on the requirement gathering part, or like identifying the business requirements and rest planning that PM can perform, like resource allocation, project timelines. This can be project manager work. So yeah, that is one of the major takeaway for me, Shifra.
Great, great. Thanks, Bhushan. Thanks for remembering. Feedback like this make me feel that yes, so whatever I'm suggesting, people are taking it and learning from it. So thanks, Bhushan. Vijay, would you like to add?
Yeah, Shipra. So what we discussed was about the SDLC phase and about the uh, thin line between the roles and responsibilities of BA and the project manager. Not to take work which is not a BA's role and later take blame for it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what's the next phase? So we suggested that these are the phases we are going to talk about. So first was initiation and planning phase. What is the next phase we suggested will be there? What comes after planning in STLC?
Uh, Execution, Shipra.
Will you directly
Like,
start with
okay.
development?
Uh, yeah, like in the phases that we have is requirement gathering and
Requirement gathering itself is not a phase. The phase is known as something else. Requirement gathering is a part of it, but the phase itself is called something else.
Is it come under project planning only? Requirement gathering?
Some part of it, yes. So within the project planning, you need to determine the scope of the project.
Yeah,
And
goal of the project.
in order to determine the scope of the project, you will capture some requirements, but those requirements will be at a very high level. So some part of requirement gathering will be part of the planning, but some will come next. And what's that phase called? That's my question. What comes?
Requirement elicitation, you will do high level requirement gathering, low level requirement gathering, then you will document it, and then
Right.
you will move forward with the development.
Right. So requirement elicitation, requirement documentation, these are tasks of which SDLC phase? What's that phase name called? So,
Analysis phase.
right, right. So SDLC, can you walk us through different phases of SDLC? Is a very common question which is usually asked in interviews from junior BAs, even from senior BAs, right? So we need to understand and remember the phases of SDLC. The first phase is planning. The second phase is analysis. Third phase is design and development. Fourth phase is testing. and fifth phase is deployment. So these are the five phases, you can safely say. There will be variations of it online, but if you go through these phases, then you will get the marks in the interview.
Can we add maintenance and support as well, Shipra?
So that is not development, right? So SDLC
Yes.
stands for software development life cycle. Support and maintenance will come after the development. So that is not an SDLC phase. So at deployment, the software development ends. After that, of course, support and maintenance will kick in. And sometimes what will happen, so in practical aspects, what will happen is there will be one team who will be working on SDLC and who will be developing the product and project. And next, once it is deployed, another team itself takes over. So the BAU team or support team or maintenance team or whatever you call that team, so there is a separate team altogether that will take over the project from you and provide the support and maintenance. Very uh, sometimes it also happens that the same development team then moves into support and maintenance also, but it could very well be a separate team. Yeah.
Understood. But like whatever I'm doing right now here, like as a BA, you also need to support, and most probably the same developer works on the support task.
See, it depends. So your development cycle may be 6 months, 1 year, but your support and maintenance will go on forever till
Exactly.
till the company switches over to some other system, or at least for 3-4 years you will be providing support and maintenance. So if a BA who developed the product for the customer, or who implemented the product for the customer, if that same BA goes into support and maintenance, that will mean that no further development is happening for that client. If there is no further development, then the same BA can move over to support team and provide the support. But if further development is planned, so we discussed what's the difference between project and product last time, and we said project will have a fixed timeline. So after 6 months or 1 year of project, or maybe 2 year, 5 years of project, after that there will be further development planned. So if there is further development, then the BA may get allocated to that development, and support and maintenance can be provided by some junior BA.
Okay. See, right now, yeah, as you already said that there is a different, like the process is different at different organizations. So for us, it's like once we go live, okay. So after that, we consider that project as a BAU, and we also cover monthly. We scope monthly requirement as a change management. So they even
Hmm.
like for each and every product, there are like 2 to 3 stories are almost there for each and every sprint.
Right, right. So,
So we need to work on that as well. Yeah.
yeah, so the change management will cater for small changes in what has already been implemented, right? But if
Yeah.
something new itself needs to be implemented, so let's say the product upgrade needs to be taken, that can very well be a part of BAU. If some minor changes needs to be made, maybe new field, or some master data values, or some type needs to be added, that can very well be taken as part of the support and maintenance project. But let's say a whole new product itself needs to be introduced, or we have lines of business in insurance, right? So let's say I provided insurance for automobile, and now I need to introduce home insurance within the same system. So
Hmm.
that whole set of home insurance, it cannot be done as part of BAU activities, right? Because it's entirely new line of business that needs to be brought in. So what will happen in that case is a project will be created, and that project will be responsible for bringing in that line of business, right? Second difference which you'll usually find is that senior BAs, they get allocated to project where implementation needs to be done. So if I have to introduce home insurance, or homeowners insurance in my system, then I need some senior BA who knows the difference between auto insurance and home insurance, who can talk to the client, who can understand their business language, who can capture what all needs to be in there, who can solutionize. But I don't need a senior BA to provide support activities. I don't need a senior BA to, add a new master data value, or, small changes which can be done by a uh, junior BA. So it again, it depends organization to organization, project to project. There are, lot of different variations. But what I'm saying is support and maintenance will come after SDLC, and the team may be same, the team may be different. Yeah.
Understood. Understood.
Yeah. So second phase we talked about was SDLC. So before we start talking about analysis phase, does anyone has any more questions? I'd like Manjula and Manu to join us on stage as well, so that we can make this session interactive. There's nothing we are going to discuss today that you might not be aware of already. We are just revising and sharing our common understanding, and just, taking out a few bits which are confusing and getting a clarification on those. So please do join us on stage and, participate in the discussion. Okay. So moving over to analysis phase. What do we understand by analysis phase? So far we discussed requirement elicitation, and we talked about requirement documentation. So first and foremost, what is the difference between requirement elicitation and requirement gathering? Do we know the difference?
Shupra, if I'm requirement elicitation is part of asking right set of questions. No?
Hmm.
What could be the which gives a better understand better answers for us for understanding.
Right. Right. And what's requirement gathering?
Mm, the word itself mentions such as like listening to the answers and making proper documentation, like uh, proper arrangement of the answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So requirement documentation is a separate thing. We'll talk about it a bit later, right? So requirement gathering and requirement elicitation, as the words suggest, in gathering you are just noting down whatever the customer is saying. You are not putting your analysis into it, and you are just, capturing whatever information is being given to you. Whereas requirement elicitation will take a BA to the next level, wherein BA is asking the right set of questions, as Vijay mentioned, and eliciting the requirement out of the client. So client does not know what client wants, and it's BA's job to make client understand what he wants and get a confirmation and get a, information required to, in order to fulfill that need. So that is the job of a BA, and that's what we call as requirement elicitation. So originally when SDLC was, the term coined in, and when people started discussing about SDLC, they used to say requirement gathering. But over a period of time, people, thought more about it, and they are like, we are not just note takers. We are not like, going to write whatever client is suggesting to us. What we are going to do is we are going to make the client understand his needs better. We are make to, get the needs out of the client. We are going to make the client understand what our product can do and what cannot do, right? We can make it as an interactive session, and we can elicit requirements out of the client. So, getting something out of the client is requirement elicitation. So requirement gathering was later, it was moved a step up, and it was called requirement elicitation. So whenever someone asks you, what do you do, always say requirement elicitation, because that will make the interviewer understand that, that your job is to make the client understand better and get the requirements out of the client, rather than just, taking some notes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Yukta. Thanks for detailed answer and clearing this out.
Yeah. Then comes the requirement documentation. Can we quickly, get some examples on what how do we document requirements? How do you document requirements? What documents do you create?
Documents such as the business requirement documents
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
uh, functional and non-functional documents.
FSD, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
Refer-
the other ones are SS system requirements. I mean, I think these are the same ones, but
Mm-hmm.
majorly we can categorize them as BRD, FRD, and non-functional
Yeah.
requirements.
What other forms of documentation are you aware of?
Forms, Shipra.
What other form of documentation? So BRD is one form.
Okay.
Yeah. What other form?
Okay. Uh, the architecture, the system design, which are done by the architecture
That is
from their
that
side.
is part of design phase. That's a design phase
Okay.
deliverable.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if a B,
So,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Vijay.
Yeah, yeah. Something like the use cases.
use cases, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Mm, yeah, Shipra, that's it. I mean, I was able to remember those.
Okay. Bhushan.
On high level, what I can say, see, as you mentioned, so requirement, we do requirement elicitation or high level requirement. On that basis, we do create BRD,
Mm-hmm.
that is business requirement document, and we further, go into those requirement and we finalize how we can do that. So that we capture under like FRD.
Right.
Then yeah, and then those particular requirements we can further break down into the like feature user stories with acceptance and criteria and all that, and certainly like we also prepare this use case documentation as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of several document we can do.
Yeah. So in a project, will you create a FSD, functional specification document, and user
Mhm.
stories both, or will you just create one of those?
I'll create one of those, but on the user story I'll add more further details when I'm doing that.
Right. Will you
Yeah.
create use cases and user stories both, or will you create only use cases, or will you only create user stories?
I'll create user stories only. Also, we can go that direction. Like, firstly, we can create user cases, and based on that use cases, we can go for user stories as well.
Right. Right. So yeah, that's the correct answer. What other forms of documentation are you aware of? Do VAs only create a BRDs, FSD, user stories, use cases, or they do also
Gap
create some other?
analysis,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
gap analysis, we can say.
Gap analysis and define to be
Then
processes and as is processes, right?
yes, yes,
So
yes.
process
Then
process documents they can create, which is part of gap analysis. Yeah. What else?
then mm, prototypes and all that also you can consider as a part of documentation only. Creating
Um,
mock-ups, wireframe, prototypes.
there is a difference between prototype and a wireframe, right? Prototype
Yeah,
is
yes,
actual
correct.
working software, a mini version of it. So that is not
Mhm.
BA will be creating, but wireframes, yes, definitely BA will be creating wireframes. Yeah,
Flow diagram we can cover.
flow diagrams or that's kind of process diagrams, right? Which we talked about as it's and to be
Yes, yes.
processes. What else?
Technical documentation, I think developers write, correct? Is that
Yeah.
correct? Or as a BA, we need to do?
Yeah, technical documentation we will not be participating in. Maybe we will review it later on, or maybe we will fill up some of the sections like a business requirement or objective and things like that. But that's not the ownership. Ownership does not lie with BAs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other document coming to mind? Data dictionaries?
Yeah, data dictionaries. I was about to say that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, no. But that we can cover under SRS only
No,
or FRD.
data dictionary is a separate document altogether. Your functional requirement document will most probably be a Word document, and your data
Mm-hmm.
dictionary will supplement it, right? It will be added as an appendix to it. So your data dictionary is most likely an Excel document wherein you will be defining ins and outs of your, each and every field. So the behavior of each field and different workflows and many things you will be capturing in data dictionary. So data dictionary is usually a separate document than
Can
FSD.
we take help of developer while preparing data dictionary?
Um, Depends. So some
Because they know all the fields, like fields in the backend, what is
but
label in, what is, yeah,
you will be defining the fields, right?
yeah,
So what will happen is you will be defining what fields you need or what client needs, what data type of that field is, how much length, how much type, precision. So everything will be decided by the BA. There can be a column which will say database field or backend field in your data dictionary, and only that column will be filled by the developer. Rest everything will be filled by the BA. BA will define, okay, in this workflow stage, this field will be editable, mandatory, or optional. In this workflow stage, the field will become non-editable and read only, like that, right? Or BA will be defining where the field will be placed, in which screen it will come, what is the type of field, what type of data we want to capture. If it is a number field, till how many decimal places we can go, whether it's a percentage field or a number field or a date field. So everything will be defined by BA. It's not a
okay,
technical team is supposed to create. That's a document BA is supposed to create. Right? Sometimes BA does not do the job correctly, and technical team will have to do the job of BA, and they will be creating data dictionary. But no, the right way to do is BA defining all the fields and all the requirements of the field, and then maybe one column suggesting backend field name that developer can enter. But rest everything is BA's job. Okay. Have we heard about RTMs?
yeah, but ITM will be provided by tester, so that's why I didn't say that.
No, RTM will not be provided by tester. RTM will be initiated by BA. So what BA will do is BA will list out all the stories. So right now we have tools like Jira and CFS and others.
Mm-hmm.
So we may not need RTM anymore. But if we are writing a BRT or an FSD, then it's a BA to start the RTM. And what they will do is they will enter all the requirements in an Excel format, and then developer will enter the code numbers, and then tester will enter the test scenario numbers, and so on and so forth. But the start of the document is done by BA, so that no requirements are missed.
Understood.
Okay, so BA will be creating RTMs. So yeah, BA will be defining feature epics, user stories if they are in using a tool or some going in agile mode, or they will be creating a BRD or an FSD. Sometimes they also create solution options assessment document or solution options document. What this document will do is it will provide different options to the client, that in order to achieve your so and so business requirement, we have option one, option two, option three, option four, as many number of options we have. And then we'll provide those options, and alongside we'll say, what is our recommendation, and which option has what cons and pros and cons of each option, right? So we'll detail out all the options in detail, and we give it to the customer to make a decision for us, right? So sometimes solution option assessment document or solution option document is also created. Then your non-functional requirements are captured um, with the help of technical team, right? Um, and data dictionaries, flow diagrams, gap analysis. Um, so all these documents are created. So as part of analysis phase, we talked about requirement elicitation. getting the requirements out of the client via different means, interview, surveys, brainstorming, and all, right? So we have different methods to get the requirements out of the client. And then second one is requirement documentation. Is that all it as part of analysis phase, or as part of analysis phase we do something else as well? Anything else coming to mind? But we should, as a BA, should be doing. So for a BA, analysis phase is the main phase, right?
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be focused on. So rest of all the other phase, BA's involvement is uh, let's say 50% only, or even less than that. But analysis phase is the one where BA is involved 100%. So apart from requirement documentation, what else a BA does?
I think we can create a product backlog, and then we can plan the number of sprints as well in the analysis phase itself. Like this many sprint will require to deliver this product. Even like timeline is already we cover in the planning phase, but when we have all these details information, then we can create a backlog and we can define the sprints as well.
Right. So one thing is backlog is of two types, right? One is the overall backlog and second is the sprint backlog.
Yeah.
So whatever items we are going to create in a sprint, that will be part of sprint backlog, and rest we have an overall backlog. So anything that a BA captures as part of requirement elicitation, uh, if it is not a part with coming within the scope of the project, then only it is moved to product backlog, and it will not be added to sprint backlog. So that's one activity, keeping track of other requests which are out of scope of current project, so that in future we can go back to the client and say, these are the requests that you asked for. Do you want to still take them and pay for them to us? So that's one activity. Very good. Second thing is sprint backlog. So I won't say assigning items to sprint, I'll say replanning the sprint backlog. So the planning exercise has already been done in the planning phase, and here we are replanning things, right, depending on the latest information. So that's very another very good point. So thanks, Bhushan. Anything else that comes to mind? Which phase we are talking about?
Analysis phase. Yeah.
Right. So as part of requirement elicitation, we will also do requirement analysis, right?
Okay. Feasibility
Yeah.
check, you mean to
And
say?
no, so basically, an analysis of the requirement, what that means is to understand one, how we are going to solutionize it, right? So that's a functional requirement. And second thing is how it impacts other systems, how it fits into the overall journey of user, how it fits into the end-to-end, uh, you know, work. So, for example, I'm making a change in my system. How is it going to impact my downstream systems? How is it going to impact maybe my data platform or data lakes, or other systems where this data goes? How does it impact my financial systems? How does it impact other systems, which are associated with my system? So right now no system stands alone, so there will definitely be further systems which are connected to my system. So I will analyze my requirement and I will understand the impact of it on other systems and other functionalities which are available in the system. So it is also possible that I'm making a change in my system and it is impacting some other functionalities or some other modules, right? So for example, I have a reports coming out of my system itself, not from data lake or some other downstream system, but from my system itself. So if I'm introducing a new field, is it going to impact any of those reports? Is it going to change the values in those reports? And if yes, how, what can I do to not make an impact on those reports? So that kind of analysis, system analysis, different modules are there. So maybe I'll having some widgets. how my widgets will be impacted, how my documents will be impacted, how my other workflow will be impacted. So if I'm making change in one workflow, does it also impact some other workflow? Does it impact some other user of the system? Do I need to define permissions around it? Right? So how my requirement is impacting my system, then how my requirement is impacting my downstream systems. So all that is part of your analysis, right? So you are analyzing your requirement.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. So do not just focus on eliciting the requirements and documenting the requirement, but also focus on analysis of it. How is it going to impact everything? So that's an essential phase, which is sometimes missed by BAs, and that the cost of missing it is too much sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So basically, under this stage, we do requirement elicitation, gathering, then requirement analysis, preparing BRD, SRS, or FRD. Then,
That's
yeah,
requirement
of course,
documentation, right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then defining the sprint backlog, product backlog.
Hmm.
I think this stage for
Replanning.
all of yeah.
Replanning. Yeah.
Okay,
What else?
I think we cover all.
So you have created a requirement document.
Mm-hmm.
That the end of it, or your analysis phase will end after you do something with those documents?
No, no. Once I go to user story level, when I
Hmm.
drafting user story, so at that
Hmm.
time, the analysis will go on like So sometimes when I write some user story, then let's say we discuss this with developer in planning state, and we get some feedback that this is something need to be answered from client, and this is something we need to add. So and also we can do a feasibility check. So I have write X in that particular story, but developer say this is not particularly feasible. So again we will go back to the client. So this will go on ad hoc basis. I'll say
Hmm. Feasibility assessment, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah. So take inputs from developer, and not only developer. Feel free to take inputs from your QC team. Feel free to take inputs from maybe your product team, right? So whomsoever is available to give you inputs, get your requirements reviewed by some senior BA. If you yourself are a senior BA, get your requirements reviewed by some peer, right? So get a peer review done, get a senior review done, get a PO review done, get inputs from technical team, take inputs from QC team, and keep on refining your requirement, keep on adding more details to the requirement. So one important point to note is, do not assume anything unless you are noting it down. If you're making an assumption, note it down in the requirement itself. Otherwise, whatever information you have, let's say even if you have taken a decision to go via a certain way, then also make a note of that decision, maybe in the history or in the comments area, or anywhere, no, as a note. So make or keep a track of each and every decision that you have taken, and the rationale behind it, why this decision was taken. Because tomorrow client is going to come for half of your requirements, and client is going to say, even if I have approved the requirement, but still this is not something I wanted something else. So do not miss out on anything, even if it's a very small thing, right? Do not miss out on anything. And whatever, let's say you're showing your requirement to a developer, and developer is asking you questions, right? Make a note of those questions, and somehow incorporate the answers to those questions in your stories or in your requirements, right? So don't leave anything to the imagination of the reader, or don't leave anything to the assumptions. Have each and everything noted down in your requirements, and take inputs from anyone and everyone that you can hold of to better your requirements and make them foolproof. Like tomorrow no further questions should come, because tomorrow if more questions will come, they'll ask you to make changes in the requirements, and you'll have lot of rework, and you'll be spending a lot of time on updating the stories which you have already delivered. So better make use of time to deliver new stories rather than updating the stories, right? So have each and everything, every input being incorporated in your stories, and feasibility assessment is one of the crucial points that the BA will be doing at this stage. So another great point. Thanks, Bhushan.
One question, Chitra. So let's
Hmm.
say you have 10 stories in your sprint backlog, and you are decided that I'll deliver at the end of sprint. So we discussed that in sprint planning, but at that time, due to the overload, developer didn't get any chance to go through story in detail. But when he started working on that story actual, so he can come up with some question in the, let's say, middle of sprint, and I'll go back to again to customer and taking clarification. Based on that, I'll update story. So in actual, like, this has happens to me several times, but in general, I'm asking that you know this is something happening in your company or where you have worked on other projects as well, or this is just an exception.
It's definitely not an exception. User stories needs to be updated couple of times, right, throughout the release and sprints, because there will be definitely some points which you might not have thought of, and someone else might have thought of. Now, the important question is how frequent are these changes, and what's the output of those changes. So, are they very small changes? Are they just clarifications, or are they changes in the requirement itself? If later on in a sprint you are someone asks you a question and you don't have an answer, and in order to support that answer you have to change the entire solution of your requirement, right? So just understand how much big impact it is going to have. You are not going to deliver the story, plus you will have to redo everything and you have to start from the scratch, right? And
Okay.
how frequent is it? Is it happening very frequently, or it's a one off case, right? So those things matter a lot. So how frequent are the changes? What's the complexity of those changes? Are they very simple clarifications, or whether they um, you know whether they are big changes requiring solution change? And uh, what's the count of these changes, right? So each and every story is undergoing a change, or it's one out of 10 stories undergoing a change. So those things matter more rather than changing the stories, because changes will definitely happen. There's nothing new in that, but we should strive for writing our stories in foolproof manner, so that only clarifications needs to be added in rather than requirement changes, if you see what I
Okay.
mean.
Let me give you example like what I have recently seen.
Hmm.
We have one portal, audit portal, and in that, like, we have issue index form. Okay, so where, like, basically requester come fill out the form and submit it, then approve, view that request and approve. Some sort of form is there. So we decided, the client said me that you need to add few more fields, few drop down field, few text field to that form. So okay, I said okay, we will add it. So I provided the fields to get added with the number of options that field, type of fields and everything. But later, while developer realized that we need to backfill the existing record as well, like 100 records previously submitted. But for that, these three new fields are not there. So we need to backfill it. But what values we have to keep it? So such kind of information is missed from my side. So
And
how you
and
will
that's
take it?
the yeah, that's a part of your impact analysis, which I mentioned previously.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's part of your requirement analysis, and that's often missed because BAs are sometimes too focused on what their story is and what changes they are doing, right? They
yes.
forget to take care of the impact of those changes on other areas which other BAs are looking into, right? So if you are making changes in any system which has gone live already,
Mm-hmm.
have a checklist with you, right? I always create a checklist for my own sake. So the very first thing that needs to be on the checklist is impact on existing records. So whenever your system is live, if you are making further changes into anything, you have to assess the impact on existing records. That's the basic impact analysis that a BA needs to do. Second thing is impact on integrations. And then I list out all the integrations which are available in the system, which send data into my application and which send data out of my application. Most 99% of the time, the things which are sending data into my system do not have an impact until and unless I'm working on that integration itself, right? But still, I need, I create a list of all those applications which are sending data into my system, and I just think about it once. Is it impacting um, um, my story? Is it impacting my requirement? If no, all good, well and good. If yes, I'll definitely make a note of it. And same goes for all the applications which are taking data out of my system. So anytime when I enter the project, that's the first thing I do. Impact on, whether my system has gone live. Do I need to assess impact on existing areas? Second thing is what other areas I need to look at. What all other integrations I need to look at. And the third thing is within my list, I'll create what modules are available in my system. And then I think, whether my other modules are getting impacted. So for example, Bhushik, you can go on mute, please. There's a lot of background noise. Yeah, thank you. So uh, within my system, I'll assess what other modules are available. For example, in an insurance application, I do endorsements or I make changes. I do policy changes. So that's one module is available. Second, I renew the policy, right? So for example, if I'm making change or introducing a new field in my new business policy or a new policy, then do I need this field in my renewal policy or not? When I renew it, do I need this same information to be there? Do I need the information to be transferred over? Do I need the information to be editable when I'm renewing the policy, right? So renew is a module in my system, and I assess, what all changes and, how renewal will be impacted, and I'll make a note of the, impact in my story. Endorsements, I have a copy functionality wherein I can copy my policies. So if I'm adding a new field in my policy, do I need to make changes in my copy functionality also? Right, I have to make changes so that when I copy, that information is also transferred over. If I'm not capturing, then who else will capture? Tomorrow bug will come, testing team will say I'm making a copy and this data is not transferring over. Developer will be like, where is it written in the story, right? The question will come on me only. So the very first thing I do whenever I go into a project is understand, what are the areas, what are the integrations, and, whether my system is live or not, and create a checklist of my own. And anytime and every time, even if my story is one acceptance criteria, even for that, I go through that checklist one by one, and I understand, are there any other requirements which are ancillary in requirements, or which are, secondary requirements to my main requirement, which I need to capture. Your client is not going to tell you that, I'm adding this field, it needs to be there on renewal. If the client is telling you, that's requirement gathering, right? You don't need to do anything, but you are not requirement gatherer, you are requirement analysts, right? So you have to say, you are adding this field on new, you need to add this field on renew as well. You need to add this field in copy function as well. And not only say this, you have to document it. Everything needs to be documented. So whenever I have any BAs, giving me stories, I always tell them, give me an area where you will say, this integration or this area, no impact or impact, and how you are going to handle that impact. Sometimes they'll say the impact of this change on some other area, let's say impact of a new field on documents will be captured as part of some other story. That's okay. Create a story title and give me the reference for it. But you do have to analyze the impact and either say no impact, or the impact will be handled in another story with the story number and the story title, or impact, if it impact is there, then it needs to move into the acceptance criteria, wherein you'll say, when I'm, on the screen, and when I'm give me the reference for it. But you do have to analyze impact, either say no impact, or the impact will be handled in another story with the story number and the story title, or the impact, if it impact is there, then it needs to move into the acceptance criteria, wherein you'll say, when I'm, on the screen, and when I have updated this field, then this field should be present onto my documents in so and so area, right? So either it should be acceptance criteria or a new story title or no impact should be mentioned. But for each and every story, give me the impact list. So all my BAs will have to do that. Yeah, so it was definitely a BMS, but it could have been avoided with a checklist.
Understood, Chitra. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, so please do go and create a checklist for your project tomorrow. Yeah, on Monday. This is going
Sure,
to,
sure.
yeah, it's going to take you an hour or so, but after that, you'll see how much better your stories are.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. So requirement elicitation, requirement documentation, feasibility assessment, requirement analysis or impact analysis. What else? What else a BA needs to do as part of the analysis phase itself? You have written a story or you have written a document. Is that it? Or what will you do with the document?
We already discussed that we will create a product backlog, then we will move the storage from product backlog to the sprint backlog, then the sprint
You have
planning.
you have created a story, right? You have drafted the story. You have noted down whatever you are understanding in the story.
Hmm.
Is that it? Or
I'll
will you
no.
go
I'll
to,
go to client for the requirement sign off.
right? So taking approval is another responsibility of a BA, right? And why I'm highlighting it separately is because sometimes it gets tricky, right? So when you refine your draft stories with the client, a client will start asking you questions, client will understand it better, and that's the time when client will give you more business scenarios which you might not be aware of even, right? They'll be like, oh, our so partners will also update this field, and you'll be like, oh, you never told me, right? So more changes might come in, or the end objective is taking requirement, requirement, taking approval on the requirements and getting them signed off. Yeah. So that's another important aspect or important work that a BA needs to do. Now your requirements are signed off. Your client has, put his stamp or approval on your requirements. Is that the end of analysis for that one, or you'll do something else as well as part of the analysis phase?
Again, facilities will be there. Is that correct, Chitra?
Presently, you have to do it before taking the approval itself, right? You will not give anything to the client which is not feasible, which is not feasible.
But if it's in the case, if as you mentioned, that might be they will come up with more scenarios, then I need to update the story. Then again, I will go back to the developers or technical
That's,
help or facility. Yes.
yeah, that's a loop you have to follow till your requirements are approved, right? So once your
Okay.
requirements are
Yeah.
approved, is that it? Or as a BA, you need to do something on that requirement before you put it on back burner and say, I don't need to do anything else on this requirement anymore.
Story points.
Story points will be given mostly by development. They have already spent their efforts, so they will not be adding story points. If if any provide efforts, they would have provided it at the start of the analysis, not later. But how the story points will be given by developer? You have written that requirements. Developer has not seen those requirements. What will you do in order to make sure that the story points are put on the requirements?
In the sprint planning or after the sprint planning, like if the story points are not important, the story points we can add
Requirement. You have written the requirement. Which developer story point? In between.
no story point estimation has to perform.
Will done by the developer, but before developer is able to do story point estimation, you need to do one step in between.
Have it
Discuss it with developers. And what do we call it in Agile? Not only developers, discuss your story, walk through your story with developers and QC.
Sprint planning.
No, sprint planning will come at the start of the sprint or before the sprint commences. You have written a story with the client. Client has approved it. You need to give a walkthrough of the story to developers and testing team. That's one more step that you will have to do so that developers are able to give you story points, right? So you need to go through each and every acceptance criteria or go through each and every functional requirement, give them the solution. This is how you are going to develop it, how you are going to test it, answer all queries, right? So that's one step you will be doing. In Agile, we call it grooming. Have you heard of the term?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So grooming is another thing that BA will have to do before BA stops looking into that requirement anymore, until and unless someone comes with a question. So grooming is a meeting wherein you will walk through each and every acceptance criteria, everything with the developer, with the QC team. If the requirements involve some calculations, then you will give them some sample values and show them how the calculations will happen and what values will be given. If the requirement is a new field, then you will tell them where the field will be placed, the screen design and all those things. If you will give them a walkthrough of the data, whatever documentation you have done, you give them a walkthrough, you answer their queries, you explain requirements to them and make sure that developers, QC and EA, all of them are on same page. It should not happen that I am in my mind my requirement is doing something else, and in developer mind the requirement is something else, and in QC mind develop requirement is something else. You as a BA have to bring everyone on the same page. Everyone should have a shared understanding of how the solution will be implemented and what exactly the system will do. You should not say that you decide whatever you want to do. No, you have to tell them what they need to do. If there is a gap in developers understanding or QC understanding, then that's a BA failure. That's not developer failure or that's not QC failure. That's a BA failure. So grooming the story or giving a walkthrough of the requirements and making everyone understand and bringing everyone on the same page is BA's responsibility. Are we good?
Okay. Uh, so let me give my current company example, Chitra. So we are team of like 4 to 5 years, 4 BAs. Okay. So we work on different applications. Like let's say I work on 4 to 5 projects. Other we also work on 4 to 5 projects. So what we do? So we have 4 fixed sprints. So we try to add stories into the sprint backlog or into the sprint. Like before the first of the like whenever the sprint is started, we usually add all the stories into sprint. And while having this sprint planning or backlog grooming, we say we walk through our stories. And like at the end we get to know that we have to deliver 80 stories or 90 stories in the sprint. But let's say the scope is increased, so developer write their story points, and based on that we can add and remove stories. So this is how we go.
That's
Ideally, it should.
planning. That's sprint
Hello.
planning. That's sprint planning activity.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a sprint planning activity. So before sprint planning, you have to groom the stories with the developers, right? You have to ask them, this is what we are going to do. How is it going to be tested? You have to answer all their queries. You have to provide all the clarifications, and then developer will give a story point. Now, when you go to the sprint planning meeting, That time you will have a couple of stories along with their story points, and then you decide, okay, which stories can go in and which stories cannot. So if there are two dependent stories, one story is ready but the other is not, then you may want to move one of the stories out. If there are too many stories which are ready and developers are like, we are going on a vacation, we don't have that much capacity, you take some stories out. If your capacity is falling low, they'll ask you, okay, what else we can do? Maybe you can introduce some bug fixes in the sprint, right? So all that is sprint planning exercise. That is usually done at the start of design and development phase, right? As part of analysis phase, you will groom the story, you will make them understand, and get the story points done. So, for example, let's say your sprint is about to start next month, but right now
Mhm.
in this month you are done with your story, right? So what you'll do is you'll groom the story, get the story points done, and for maybe next 2 weeks you are not going to look into the story anymore because this is now final. But if you have just taken the approval on the story, you still need to groom those stories somewhere, in the upcoming 2 weeks, so that you can then take up this story for discussion in the sprint planning, which is the start of design and development phase.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here, like we work differently. We decided that this many stories has to go. We discussed this in sprint planning meeting only. If they have any questions or that, and
No.
based on that, later if they find out, then we can go with one-to-one discussion if the developers have a lot of queries or they just add comments and we answer that and like it depends on other BA PM requirement priority as well. If some BA come to me, Bhushan, my these requirements are urgent or these are the newly added requirements for my current projects. Can you please work with stakeholder to remove few stories from your project? So that's how we go.
Yeah, so when is developer giving you story points in the sprint planning meeting itself?
Yeah, or like we just discuss story in the sprint planning, and after you know, like if the story is completely ready, they go through sprint board, they review the story, they added the question itself that we answer in sprint planning. If let's say, there is some delay from the client or I didn't get chance to work with client for the and story is not perfectly groomed. So mostly, I just added story just before the sprint planning meeting. So at the sprint, we just discussed that story on high level, and after that, developer and tester review it, and they added the story point. So
Okay, so maybe so right. Sometimes what happens is developers say that give me a walkthrough and I'll think about it, I'll discuss about it, and then I'll put a story points to it. So
exactly, this is how we do. Yeah,
yeah, so if you're doing that, so when is your sprint planning happening? Is the sprint planning happening at the start of the sprint, or
start of the sprint. Start of the sprint.
yeah, so that's a risky way of doing it, right? So at the sprint planning itself, we are looking at what all story, or whether I'm able to fulfill the. Bhushan, if you can go on mute when you are not speaking, please. Yeah. So that's the approach that you are taking is a bit risky approach, in the sense that it is possible that you are not able to fulfill the capacity. For example, there are 10 developers and available 2 week sprint, so available for 10 days. So you have 100 PDs of work, right? Or and let's say if you are saying equivalent 100 PDs is equivalent to 100 story points. So you will you may realize in the sprint planning itself that whatever stories you have ready, they are very very small stories, and the total is adding up to only 50. Then what will you do for the rest 50 story points? You don't have a any you cannot add new stories now, right? Because it's just a 2 week sprint. So it's a risky way of doing things. Ideally what you should do is you should start grooming the stories a week in advance at least. Give a walkthrough of the stories to the developer and QC team, so that they can think about it and they can estimate it better, rather than just thinking on spot and randomly putting in some number. They can analyze the story, they can understand what all they need to do and give you better story points. That's one benefit of doing it a week ahead. Second thing is, uh, you will have a visibility of, okay, so far my I have a capacity of 100 story points, but I only have 50 story points worth of work, right? So you can start thinking in advance what your team is going to do for rest of the days, or what are the stories from upcoming sprints which you can make ready in the short time, and you can brought them in. So if you're doing it at the start of the sprint, then it's a bit risky way of doing it. Plus, it is putting too much pressure on developers and QC team to give you the story points then and there.
But okay, understood. But this is how it goes. And sometimes what happen in the like we do run monthly sprints. So sometime middle of sprint, some stakeholder come to me, Bhushan, this is urgent requirement I have. Can you please accommodate in the current sprint? So at that time, I work with devs and testers. I add story, depend on the feasibility of it, and at the same time, I will remove couple of stories. Like I take a priority in that case.
That's an ongoing activity, right?
Yes, yes. But how you manage bugs, Shipra? So let's say in middle of sprint you get one bug and developer need to spend two story point of and might be QA require one story point work. So how you manage that?
So my time is fixed, right? All I can do is play around with the scope. So if I'm putting in some 2 story points worth of work, then I have to take something out worth 2 story points.
But stakeholder or client may come to you that that is not my fault. That bug is your system fault. So I don't want to remove my deliverable from the sprint. So how you can handle that then?
But was it really your fault? But because if it is, then
Client will always come to us that the let's say there is one feature which is working previously, but somehow in the middle of sprint, I don't know what happened, but it is not working properly. And
yeah. So
now my
because
developer needs to
yeah.
spend or my tester needs to spend time on it. And we already decided that no, at the end of month, these are the highest requirement. We will deliver 10 stories at the EOD. But
So usually what happens is that, let's say if you are having 4 weeks sprint, 4 week sprint, then what you will do is you will plan for only 3 weeks of development, and you'll keep the last week for bug fixing. Okay, if you have 3 weeks sprint, then you have 2 weeks for development, one week for bug fixing, and very picking up very small items. So you do your development ahead, and you fix the bugs towards the end of it. But you always keep a buffer in your planning, that I will have some bugs, I will have some regression issues, I will have some defects noted, and I will fix those. It's not like you'll have your developers filling up on working till late. It's also a BA's job to ensure that they have all the requirements ready at the start of the sprint. It should not happen, and that's why I'm saying if you are doing sprint planning at the in the first week, and then you are telling the developer what they need to do, they are not getting any time for designing it. They are not getting any time for creating a technical spec for it. Plus, it is putting too much pressure on them to give the story points then and there, right? So the story points estimates are not correct. They'll say three story points or three PDs, and later on they'll realize it's a 5 PD work, right? So your story points estimates are not correct. Plus, at the start you will realize, okay, I have 10 stories which were supposed to be ready, but they are not ready right now. So then you'll go back to the client and you'll be like, okay, start the development and I'll give you more stories. So what you'll do is you are giving them the stories towards the end of it. Towards the end of it is the is time when they should be focusing on bug fixing. That's not the time when they will be doing the story development, because then you will not have any time for bug fixing, right? So that's the if your processes are defined like this, you're bound to get bugged with the wrong processes. Your processes should be have your sprint planning done ahead of the sprint itself. Ideally, it's not something that you'll find somewhere, but that's a good thing to do. So have your sprint planning ahead of your sprint start, so that you know at the sprint start what is going to happen for the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks, right? As a BA, ensure that my sprints are always full. I should have 4 or 5 stories in my kitty, which I should be able to give to the developer in case my sprint is falling short of any story points. Right? I should work ahead. So what we do is we work two sprints or 3 sprints ahead. right? So if my next sprint is going to start, my priority will be next sprint, but it is not like I'm not looking into next sprint or after that or after that. I will have a complete view of what all is there in my plate, what all I need to do, and I'll start picking up things. So there will be some things which are going to take more than one sprint to nail down and to solutionize and get the approvals on. So I'll start them months in advance. I start discussing those items ahead of their planned sprints along with my regular activities of the upcoming sprint.
Understood. But Shipra, bug resolution is you have SLA maybe 24 1 day or 2 days. So you cannot wait for end of sprint to deploy that thing. You have to
So are you
create emergency CR and deploy the changes on
so
production.
so that's a problem because your support team and your development team is one and the same. You're
Yes,
supposed to
yes,
you're
yes,
supposed to have
yes.
Yeah, you are supposed to have separate support team. That's what I said. Your support team needs to be separate so that in case there are any regression issues which have leaked into your live environment, or if there are any important defects or important changes, or maybe there is some regulatory requirement or something like that, right? So anything that is important to be done, separate team should be looking into it, not your development team. The whole structure itself is incorrect.
Yeah, that's what we have. Like we have specific set of developer working on
In that case,
specific projects, and they don't support other projects, but they are all they are also handling the support works and everything.
yeah. So in that case, then keep some buffer for support activities always. So see how much
Understood.
time you have taken in the past to manage the support activities, and find out an average and keep 1 week out of your 4 week sprint to just work on support items. You can also say 1 week out of a 4 week sprint will be support items plus bug fixes, something like that. But if your same team is doing support also, then you have to keep some buffer available
Understood.
for those. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we covered, start of the analysis till end of the analysis. We'll pick up the items which are planned for our current sprint, upcoming sprints. We'll have a view of all those items. We'll do a bit of analysis at our end first. Then we went to the go to the client, elicit the requirements, not gather the requirements, but elicit the requirements from the client, document those requirements, take inputs from dev team, QC team, and anyone and everyone we can get hold of, refine those requirements, get those requirements approved, create data dictionaries, RTMs, and all the other documents that we will need, solution assessment documents. Then get those requirements approved, groom them with the team, give a walkthrough with the team, answer all their queries, bring everyone on the same page. And that's the time when we'll, say analysis phase is over for this requirement. And then, let me focus on some other requirement. So that's all we'll do in analysis phase. Okay. Any questions? Anyone? Hi, Chetan.
Hi, Shipra.
Yeah. Do you have any questions?
Yes, actually, I had a question when there are multiple systems involved. So we have to do
Hmm.
end-to-end integration testing, right? So,
Yes.
as a business analyst, so suppose there are three teams involved in one particular functionality that we're developing. So, who would be the end-to-end testing owner for that? Uh, so for end-to-end integration testing, how should it be coordinated or managed? That sort. Uh,
That will be client, Chetan.
okay.
So clients will have a SIT team, system integration testing team, along with the UAT team. So client will be doing SIT plus UAT once you make the deliveries. And that makes sense also, right? User UAT is your user acceptance testing. So users will have to do it. System integration testing is how your system is impacting other systems, which are your client systems. You don't have access to those systems in order to perform system integration testing, right? You can't access their system, so you cannot test their systems. Client only have the access. So client has to do SIT.
Okay.
Yeah, BA will provide support, and that's what we will discuss in our next
Okay.
session. So we covered planning and analysis, planning in the last week's session. We covered analysis phase in this week's sessions, and those are the main two phases. And then we'll have a look at, design and development, QC. QC will include UAT and SIT,
Okay.
and then deployment. Yeah,
Yeah.
in our next week's session, because those are going to be a bit more discussion around those three. So we'll take it up in the next week. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe I'll share my thoughts in the next session on this.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Please do join us, and we can discuss in detail on how the BA gets involved in the QC phase, which will include your quality assurance, UAT, SIT, and all other different types of testings. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Shipra, for your insights. It was great.
Yeah. Was it helpful? Was today's session helpful?
Yes, it was. Thank you,
Great.
Bhushan,
Thanks,
for your
Chetan. Thanks for
questions.
joining us.
Yeah, but I take all all the session. You guys didn't get any chance to ask your queries, but that is fine. We can cover it in next session.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions in regards to what BA does in analysis phase? Yeah, I forgot about one important point, and that is requirement management. Do we understand what a requirement management is?
To identify dependencies.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's keep it a question for the next week, because requirement management is something which is an ongoing activity throughout SDLC, which a BA needs to perform. Yeah. So,
Shipra,
uh,
can you give a short answer of it?
so think about it, explore it, Google it out, and
Okay,
I'd like to
okay,
hear
no
your
problem.
understanding next week. Yeah. But just remind me to cover requirement management. It just came to my mind. So just remind me to cover requirement management next week. Yeah. So we'll definitely cover it next week. Any other questions related to analysis phase itself before we wrap up?
No,
Anything from your side, Vijay?
No, Shubhra. Good.
Okay. Was this session helpful?
Yeah,
Yes,
definitely, Shubhra.
was.
Yeah,
Great. Great. Okay. So next week we'll cover requirement management. We'll cover role and responsibilities of BA in other SDLC phases. We'll start the session with a summary of this session. So I'd like you to give me a summary and key takeaways. Right. So anyone who will be joining us, please do share what was your key takeaway from this session, from today's session. What is that thing that make you realize, oh, this is quite important, and let me make a note of it. So we'll start with that in the next week's session. Yeah. Great. So thanks everyone. Thanks once again for joining us, and I'll hope to see you next week in when we continue our session, today's session. So thanks
thank
all.
you,
thank you.
Shipra. Thanks for your time. Bye,
Thank,
everyone. Enjoy your
thank
weekend.
you. Happy weekend. Good night.